And a good day, everyone, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join Epicenter in our live webinar. So at Epicenter, we focus on services ensuring Oracle HCM Cloud integrates seamlessly within your IT system landscape. My name is Jean-Bart Hebenaar, and I'm Head of Marketing and Sales within Epicenter, and I have the honor of moderating this webinar today. So today we'll be sharing our best practices around handling data migration exercises during Oracle HCM Cloud implementations in an accelerated fashion. So I'm very happy to introduce Dave Docherty, our Senior Sales Director, who has extensive experience in the area of managing HR transformation programs across various multinational customers, where effective data migration always has played a central role to the success of any of the Oracle HCM Cloud implementations that we do. So just before we begin, I'd just like to take a few moments to explain a few things on how this session will be led. So firstly, we will record this webinar, and we'll be sharing that link for that recording to you or with you after this webinar. So you can feel free to share that with your colleagues, or you can just save it for future reference. All audio and video functions for all participants are disabled. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A functionality to jot down your queries. And I'll make sure, as my job is today moderating this webinar, to cover these and kind of remind Dave what kind of questions are being asked. So Dave will be sharing his screen, has prepared a couple of slides in support of his presentation, and if you're on a mobile device, you can easily use the Zoom function to view the slides in more detail. So the duration of this webinar is approximately 20 minutes, and we will close out with a brief Q&A, so we'll give you some opportunity in a short time frame to ask any additional questions you may have, and we'll answer those. So with that, I will now hand over to Dave Docherty, who will surely entice you on the trending topic of accelerating your data migration exercise experiences. Dave, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jean-Bart, and absolutely, I will definitely be enticing everybody on the topic of data migration. So firstly, I would like to echo Jean-Bart's sentiments and offer a personal welcome from me here in London, in a very dark and grey London today. So yeah, thank you for joining us wherever you are in the world. I hope that this also finds you all healthy as we all still come to terms with the changes in our lives a little bit this year. And as things hopefully start to open up where you are, as they are starting to here in the UK. Now, we've covered this a little bit in another webinar previously, but data is critical to the success of the HR department. You can only truly unlock the value of your investment in Oracle HCM Cloud, or actually any other HR system when you come to think of it, with high quality data. So as a result of this, data migration is always going to be a key work stream in your implementation. Now, as Jean-Bart said, I have a multi-year background in HCM implementation, and I've worked with Oracle HCM Cloud specifically for around 7 years already. So historically, I've seen many challenges with data migration that can impact the success of an implementation, whether that be through missing deadlines, not providing the desired data quality, or actually all too frequently a combination of the two. Now, here at Epicenter, we live and we breathe everything to do with data, and we recognize both the value of data migration and also the complexity behind it that we know creates risk for implementation projects. So as a result, today, I'm going to discuss a little bit about those challenges and how our technology has been developed to overcome those challenges, which in turn can accelerate and improve your data migration project. So in order to start with that, we're going to have a quick look at the data migration process. Now, I'm sure this is familiar to all of you who are joining us today, but just so that we're all on the same page, I just wanted to quickly touch on this process. So there's one major objective of migrating data to Oracle HCM Cloud, and that's to get the data from your source system, whether that be a local payroll, could be an ERP system, a legacy HR system like PeopleSoft or EBS, and the objective is to move that data to Oracle HCM Cloud. And now there are typically 3 major steps in that process. The first part is the extract process. So this is getting the data out of the source system. So here, there are a few key tasks here, One of those is data cleansing, so making sure the data you have in that source system is clean. Then you need to validate that data, make sure it's accurate before you then extract that data out in order for it to be sent towards Oracle. Then somewhere in the middle, there's this transform part. And here is where you need to do any mapping from your extract, from your source system to Oracle HCM Cloud. So very simple example of this is, well, let's say gender is stored as the letter M and F in your source system, and maybe it's male, female in Oracle HCM Cloud. Then you need to map those values. So M equals male, F equals female. Very simple example, but you need to do that for several fields along the way. You also need to be able to build Oracle loaders. So these are the Oracle HDL files, and these are the templates that Oracle mandates for you to load the data in. Those need to be generated and built. Then on the load side, I'll come back to corrections as we get through the process. On the load side, then you need to load that data into Oracle. Then you need to manage any errors, and also then finally, once you're happy that the data is loaded without errors, then you need to validate that data by the business again at the end for a final sign-off. Now, typically, this is an iterative process, and depending on the relative success of each iteration, you'll more than likely have to go back to that first step to make corrections as you go through. So those corrections can either come back to the data cleansing, or it can be something that gets corrected in the transform layer. Maybe that's correcting one of the mappings or correcting some of the logic that you have in there, or indeed just correcting some of the values. So this is, so far so straightforward. I think hopefully that should be familiar to everybody. So what are the real challenges that we have with data complexity, and what makes something that looks straightforward actually in reality be anything but? So a couple of general challenges. First of these general challenges is something that I think sometimes can be overlooked, which is that this is a critical path work stream. Data is fundamental, and it is always sitting on the critical path. Now, you can't go live without data, and quite honestly, you can't often get into any other key phases without it either. So, for example, a UAT phase. Therefore, it's critical to the success of every part of a project that data migration is successful, and if it fails, then typically it will result in delays to the overall program. And I feel that sometimes that gets overlooked. And you could say it's often treated as a bit of an afterthought. It's treated as one of those things that should happen, but it's never given quite the same attention as the functional design of the application, or maybe the user experience or the processes. So all of those things are critical, but your HR system is nothing without data. So really, data should be the most important work stream on any implementation. But yes, given the complexity and importance that we attach to it, we find it's often not treated this way. So that's just a couple of overall general challenges that I wanted to highlight up front before getting into some of the specifics. So what are the challenges we have in the extract phase? Well, in the extract phase, we generally will involve some kind of custom development. So either this needs to be extracted in the format that Oracle wants, or perhaps in some other format, but it often needs a bit of custom development on the side of the source system in order to get the data out in the format we want, to get all the historical data out, everything that we need. We also may sometimes have a reliance on third parties. So for example, if the source data is stored by another company, you may rely on them for this. So if the data is stored by an outsourced payroll vendor, or perhaps a system vendor somewhere, this can all have cost implications, and it takes away some level of control from the work stream. So engaging those vendors is always going to be a critical part of that process. So it's not always as simple as possible to get the data out in the way you want it, when you want it, and as quickly as you may want it. So this gives a little more detail here, but I think I've probably said it really, but bad data out here is bad data in. So it just highlights the importance of needing to make sure that this data cleansing part is done correctly. Now, in the transform stage, we've faced some further challenges. First one is with mapping. Now, mapping is always going to be required to align your source data to Oracle HCM Cloud. So it's an essential task. Often it can just be used one time for data migration, not with us, and I'll save something about that for later on towards the end of this session. But that's always going to be required, and that's okay. We accept this task. That's not a problem at all. But generating the Oracle data loaders, this actually can present a challenge. So some way or another, you have to put the data you've got from your source system into the Oracle loader format, HDL format. So this can be done a few ways. So it can be done manually using Excel. You can do it by creating a custom program, which we see quite a lot. Now that can be some custom code in Excel itself, or it can be a completely custom program in some other software. Or as I just mentioned, you can extract from the source in Oracle format already, but this can be expensive, time-consuming, and risky, because you're basically asking another vendor or people with non-Oracle expertise to be able to extract the data in an Oracle format that's very unfamiliar to them. Now, corrections. You'll inevitably have to make some corrections. It's incredibly rare that you'd get this right first time, because as we said, this is a complex process and it's iterative, and you tend to learn things along the way. So what tends to be required here is that you need to make changes to the logic, make changes to the mapping, and depending on how you're doing this, it can be very time consuming and you can have a risk of error, particularly if this is done manually or in Excel. So if you're trying to create Excel rules to transform the data, or Excel rules to generate this Oracle file, and you need to make changes, then that can be quite a complex process, and it's definitely open to things going wrong. And what we see here is that this stuff is frequently done from scratch, not really proven before, and is always done sort of custom based on the implementation that it's for. So you're always entering a little bit of unknown territory here. The third step of the process, the load part of the process, more challenges here. So individual manual loading of files is time consuming. So typically with Oracle, it falls to an individual to log into the application and load the files in a specific order, one at a time. So you load a person file, and then you can load a worker file, and then various others after it. Now, the success of this will be a complete unknown until you try to load and see what errors come back. And you can be there trying to load data multiple times until the file is even accepted by the system, let alone until it's loaded and you can go and see whether it's successful or not. And believe me, I've seen this happen, as I'm sure some of you have as well, where it's just this sort of continual process of trying to work out why your file won't load. So once you have managed to load it, you will get some errors. Now you have to go and manually retrieve those error logs, work through them, and then you go back to correct the data or the logic. Now, there's always going to be errors and error logs, so I think we accept a little bit of that. But nonetheless, it is a challenge that is there. Lastly, data validation. So this takes place once technically we're happy that the load is completed to 100%. And this is a must-complete activity by HR in order to validate the data that's been successfully loaded. It can sometimes be difficult to compare that mapped data in Oracle back to the source, because you're not comparing like for like. But this is still an activity that needs to happen, and we're able to see the data in both places and make that happen. We do have a way of making this a little bit better as well, which I will come to. So really, a final thought on these challenges. So each of these three steps of the process and all the tasks underneath them all present certain challenges. Now, in a one-off exercise, you can accept these inefficiencies. However, data migration is an iterative process, and it's typically repeated multiple times. Therefore, each inefficiency in this process is amplified by the number of times it gets repeated. So surely there has to be a better way. And, well, I wouldn't bring you all here today to give you the problems without a solution. So how does Epicenter improve and accelerate your data migration? Well, we do this via unique leading technology in our proprietary data and integration hub. So let me tell you exactly what we do to help this. Now, on the extract side, so we can't do much about data cleansing. We're not magicians. We're close, but we're not quite. But really, even if we were magicians, you always need to have HR eyes on the data and confirm its accuracy before trying to load it anywhere. So really, that data cleansing and data validation part of the process always needs to stay there. It's super important. And yeah, that's something that is best in the hands of HR. However, we can help make that data extraction easier. So to load data into our hub, we don't need the data in any specific format. So it can be provided untransformed as it comes from the source. Now, that means that there's no That reduces the need for any complex coding. It doesn't need to be in Oracle format. It doesn't need to be in any particular file format. It can come out however the system will generate it. So that will speed that up and make that a cheaper and quicker process. So long as it's in a fairly common file format, then we can deal with it. So already, even before we've touched the data, we already saved some issues related to maybe some of those third-party expenses and complexity with getting the data out of your source system, and we eliminate any need to extract in the complex Oracle HDL format. Next stage is where we come into our Epicenter managed integration services, and this in the transform stage is where it really comes to life. So first part is configurable mapping. Now, mentioned mapping before, it's something that we'll always have to do, and we're okay doing it. It's part of it, but we just try to make that a little bit easier. So we provide configurable mapping in front-end screens that are user-friendly and can even be done by HR people. There's no need for complex coding, and therefore no need for quite the same level of technical resources you may need otherwise. There is also a way to make that mapping more useful for other tasks. And again, I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. Now, after we've done the mapping, that's when we can really start to accelerate this process, because we're all about accelerating your data migration. So we can do pre-validation of data. This is really cool. We can validate the referential data. So for example, if you've got 100 departments configured in your Oracle HCM environment, and then you've got a source data set, and in that source data set, there might be lots of employees, and maybe there's 120 unique departments in that source data set. Already, we can validate that there's a mismatch because there's 20 departments we have in the source that aren't replicated in Oracle HCM Cloud. So we know before you even try and load the data into Oracle that there's an issue there, and you need to either go and correct that data or perhaps correct the configuration in Oracle itself. So yeah, we can already pick up these things, and that means we can catch errors up front, which means that process of loading the files, of having to repeatedly load the files and see one error after another as you try and load it. If we can catch some of these errors early, then it means that we can speed up that load process when we get there. Now, once we're ready to load to Oracle, we've validated the data, we're happy, we have already pre-built the Oracle HCM loader files. So those HDL templates are already built and already available in our hub. So at the touch of a button, we can basically automatically generate those files. No complex coding, no complex Excel trickery, no wasted hours for your teams. Lastly, for corrections, we can either change the logic errors by configuration. Again, we don't need to do this via code, we do it by configuration. And we even give you the ability to manually change the data. So perhaps if it's coming to cut over weekends and you notice some errors, you can manually correct those in our hub as well, and then load that corrected data up into Oracle Cloud. Now, when we load the data into Oracle Cloud, as well as automating the generation of the loader files, the load itself can be automated, again, saving precious time. So we do this. We don't need to have someone sat there loading the files manually one by one. We can do this automated in the right sequence and no need to wait by the screen. Because we've done the pre-validation, the errors are reduced, so we have fewer iterations of this and quicker results. Data validation. Again, it's a business task, so no magic bullet here, but we do have a trick up our sleeve here, and I promise I will come back to that soon. So, just to recap, so our data migration process, all these key tasks of all these steps, when you introduce Epicenter managed integration services, all those green boxes you see, all those areas where our technology can improve both the speed and the quality of your data migration. And overall, that makes it faster, higher quality, and crucially, repeatable. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times throughout this session, there's a couple of features that I said I would come back to. So now I'm going to explain what these are. And these are what I call the bonus benefits of the data migration work that we carry out. So during the transform phase, we know that we need to do a mapping between the source system and Oracle HCM Cloud. So as I said, normally nice deliverable, but it has limited value beyond data migration. Tend to use it just for that process, nothing else. But not with Epicenter. We can reuse this for not one, but two additional pieces of our core functionality. Now, the first of these is integrations. And we call the wrapper around all of our services here our managed integration services. And while data migration is a huge part of that, and while that's what I'm talking about here today, our speciality and what we're famous for is our integrations from Oracle HCM Cloud. And we can reuse any mapping developed for data migration for outbound integrations going back the other way. So as an example, if I'm getting my source data from a payroll system, that maybe it was the master system at the time, but it's being replaced by a global instance for Oracle HCM Cloud, but that payroll system still needs that data going forward in order to pay people in country. Fantastic. We can do one mapping to get the data from payroll into Oracle, and then we can reuse that mapping to then take the data back from Oracle down to payroll every month for that payroll run. I'm not here talking about reusing just the design, I'm talking about reusing the configuration as well, because it's all configured in the same place. Same can be true for an ERP. So if there's an ERP that is an HR system, but is still going to be there as for other business functions afterwards, same rules apply there. So that's how we can help speed up some integrations with the work we do for data migration. We can also do this with something that we call data realignment. Now, data realignment is a compare function where you can compare data in our tool between Oracle HCM and another system. And again, this uses the same mapping as for data migration. And this is the really cool bit. It can automatically push corrections to one or both of those systems. So this is great for a few things. Now, before when I was talking about the final data validation during the load process, I said we had a trick here to help with that, and well, this is it. So once you've loaded the data into Oracle HCM Cloud, you can then take the data from Oracle, the data from your source in our tool, and you can compare them both in real time. You can see the field values right next to each other for all of the employees. You can even download that into an Excel file, and you can go and you can do whatever comparison you want to do, and you can even go and make corrections in that file, re-upload it back to our tool, and then it will push those corrections either to Oracle or to the downstream system. So this is a fantastic tool, and we also use this with our customers for testing integrations, and we also use the data realignment for performing business as usual data quality audits as well. So if you wanted to verify and align the data in your systems, every month or every quarter, this tool will do it. So here we do the mapping once, and we get to make use of it 3 times. And this is the real value of our tooling, is when you combine it to perform all 3 tasks. So that's pretty much it for me for the content of this, but just a quick recap. So HR data is more important than ever in this data-driven era. We have a lot more information on this particular topic, and I'll point you to that towards the end of this presentation. Data migration, critical work stream, poses many challenges to an Oracle HCM Cloud implementation, but the value of that work stream is so high that it's important, absolutely crucial that you get it right. Epicenter has cutting-edge tooling that accelerates this process for Oracle HCM Cloud customers, and hopefully in the last 15-20 minutes I've showed you exactly how that happens. And then not only that, we make the process repeatable, not just for data migration, but also we make it reusable for integrations and ongoing data quality, providing everything you need to start your HCM implementation journey with the right data, and ensure that data, and give you the tools to ensure that data stays that way through forevermore. Further information, we will send the slides out, as Rombart mentioned at the start, to everyone that joined this session. But if you want to take a screen grab or something of this, then feel free to do so. There's a few things that are worth reading here. So we have a white paper on the future of data and analytics in HR, which covers a lot more about the importances of data. We also have the challenges of data migration and steps to improve data quality. These are 2 blog posts that we've published recently. You can see all of our blog posts at the Epicenter blog. We are on LinkedIn, so please follow us there for more insights and to be notified of any of our future events. I am also on LinkedIn, so please feel free to come and connect with me on there. And alternatively, if you have any questions after this and want to follow up with me individually, or if you're thinking, hey, my data migration could do with being accelerated, then please reach out to my email. And with that, I will hand you back to Jean-Bart.
Thanks, Dave, for that great presentation. Very insightful. We have a couple of questions lined up, and first one's about data migration, whether this covers only historical data migration or actually cutoff data migration.
Yeah, so the answer to that is actually it covers both. So it's up to the customer what scope of data they want to bring in. So that can either be just the most recent set of data, or we can bring in the history as well. So we have no limit with our tool as to what data set we bring in. So quite simple, I think that.
Indeed. Maybe just to add on, we see a combination of both scenarios occur, and we have experience with handling both types of data migration exercises in the past. So indeed, as you said, Dave, it's something we see in all variances.
Yeah.
Let me see, I have another question that came in around, let me just see here. What would you recommend as a best practice for data cleansing in the source system prior to extracting the data?
Yeah, so with the data cleansing, I would probably say a couple of things. I think the important thing there is to give it the right attention, because what happens a lot is you have, and it flashed up on the slides, is you end up starting with bad data, and then you're in a bad position because you'll struggle to sort of improve that quality during this process. So I'd say firstly is to make sure it gets the right attention on your project. So that could be the sponsorship from senior management. And it's also about getting the right bandwidth on there as well. One thing that often happens is that HR get told the data quality is your responsibility, but nobody really supports them in that task or gives them the bandwidth, and people end up doing it sort of when they already have a day job that might be full time. So I would say you need to dedicate the right resources to it, and it needs to be it needs to be the right resources with the right level of knowledge of the data, and you need to be able to give them the tools to do it. So give them the ability to give them the right reports, give them the right guidance and structure as to what they should be looking for. So what are they looking for? You know, they're looking for missing data, then they're looking for certain things that should be accurate. You need to prioritize the most important data points, because if you get the top priority 10 to 15 fields right, then that's going to be a really good start. So I would say all of those things, and giving those tools and that information, that support to your HR people that have real knowledge of that data.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Just another one here. How about the loading capabilities? How does the source file get loaded through your managed integration services?
Yeah, so the source file can be loaded in a couple of ways. So whichever format we get, we can either load that manually into our hub, or we can even automate that as well, so that you can have more frequent drops of that source data and eliminate some of that manual effort. So yeah, I talked a lot about the way we automatically load data into Oracle. I didn't talk so much about how it gets from source to our tool, so that's a good question. But yeah, the answer is we either load it manually into our tables through a spreadsheet, a file you provide, or we can even automate that and treat it more like almost like an inbound integration.
Cool, thanks, Dave. And a final one here, which I might take on myself. So it's the question is it a good practice to migrate work structure and employee assignment history? I'll be quite blunt with this one. We are, we're not very favorable. Well, we don't recommend as a best practice to migrate historical data too much. Why? Is because it just adds complexity with regards to the referential data that you also need to include all the history for. Otherwise, you will run into data integrity issues. So our best practice that we tend to recommend that our customers follow is to really maintain certain data elements which contain historical data, such as, for instance, original hire dates, but limit it to as few fields as possible and not build up that entire history.
Yeah.
So there's always a possibility also to archive historical data, which can be available for reporting purposes if necessary. But when deploying Oracle HCM Cloud for the first time, for instance, you'd like to start off with a clean slate and maintain, the original values back in the dates that that existed on the row of data that was valid upon hire, for instance, but not much further than that. Would you agree, Dave?
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. I think with work structure, I would say that if you're migrating data from multiple systems, then you end up with a very inconsistent work structure in your Oracle Cloud database. And even if you're migrating from one legacy system, there can still be a lot of bad data in there. You may have thousands and thousands of departments that are active, but nobody's been a part of one of those departments for 10 years. Well, you don't want to bring those structures across to your new system. As John Bart said, you want to start from a clean slate and start in a good position. So yeah, I would not recommend to migrate that if you can avoid it. And with the employee assignment history, agree with everything John Bart said. What I would add is yes, the information from the higher row, because that's really important for things like seniority dates. And then after that, I would say anything that you need for your critical business processes. So for example, if you need a year's salary in order to evaluate somebody for a bonus, or maybe it's 2 years salary, whatever it is, then bring that across, but don't bring across any more than that than what you need for those processes. And archiving is going to be the way forward for that, lest you add too much complexity.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. Just conscious of time, I think we need to conclude our webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. Like I mentioned before, I'll be sharing the link to the webcast with you as well as the slide deck that Dave used during his presentation today. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and were able to take away something valuable. Just a reminder, Epicenter hosts these types of webinars regularly, and our next webinar will be in a few weeks' time. So just to be notified when registration is open, please follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that you are included on the next list of invitations that we send out. So thanks again for your participation, and have a great week ahead.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye now.